Here.
Good morning. Welcome to the forum. Great to see everybody here today. Today's presenter is Reverend Dr. Brian Stratton, who is Associate Professor of Philosophy at UNC Pembroke. Don't make fun of him because he's from UNC. He's all right. He's vetted. He's been vetted by the pastor of the congregation, in fact.
Wow.
Who he happens to be married to.
Yeah.
So today's discussion is divine diplomacy models for interreligious dialogue. Thank you, Brian.
Would you pass these out?
Yes.
Oh, got it.
Well, a couple of things as we're getting ready to get started. First of all, I normally write on the board, but that's out. One, because there's not enough screen. Two, whoever used the dry erase markers last left the cap off, so there's nothing there. But you can get by with the handout because that's all I was going to write on the board. So a little bit about the discuss topics is I don't see it as my job, as it were, to tell you folks the way it is, but rather to present options and alternatives and for you to figure out in your own mind what works best for you. So what I'm going to talk about today is some of the ways or some of the models we can use for interreligious dialogue. These are fairly common and the conversations often take place that way. And I will need participation from you rather than my just talking the whole time. No one knows the sound of my own voice better than me, but even I get sick of it. So help me out, folks. And that. So let's talk about some ways you can understand how your own faith tradition or religion could possibly relate to other faith traditions. Okay? And the first model that you can use is what I'm calling exclusivism. And in the exclusivist model for interreligious dialogue, it takes a rather extreme view, I guess you could say. Exclusivism basically says, my religion is right and your religion is wrong. So that a conversation from a person who embraces exclusivism is not so much going to be a mutual dialogue, but what form would you think it would take? Okay, Ken, you're putting your fists together. What do you mean by that?
If you do connect with another person, you just bump against each other and bounce away.
Okay, so basically, right? Disagreement. What might be another possibility if these folks get election, don't really want any feedback from the other group.
Advertising.
Yes, an attempt to convert the other person to your point of view. So it's really not much of a conversation that goes on there. It's very much one-sided. And if there is a take, it's usually an argument as to why my religion is superior to yours and you should embrace mine and this kind of thing. So exclusivism, though probably very few folks would think in these terms, but it's a very common and very widespread model. But before we dismiss exclusivism as a model for interreligious dialogue, what might be some of the strengths of having an exclusivist position? Can anybody think of anything that might be a positive? Yes, Terry.
The purity of the doctrine.
Okay, and why would that be a positive, you think?
That it ends up being, there's a clarity to it, and in the sort of black and white thinking, and doesn't get into things that are confusing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, for some individuals, assuming that you've got the answer and it works for you, I guess I would say it can be very emotionally comforting or psychologically comforting for a person if they adopt a model like that. Okay, what else might be a possible strength of this model?
Wavering resolve.
Okay, good, yes. We can say that these are people that have high levels of commitment and dedication to what it is they believe, right? There's nothing wishy-washy about them. They're going to stand by their position come May. Good, good. That might be another strength of this model.
Associated with others of like mind, you've got a pretty strong group.
Excellent, very good. And yes, the people that take these exclusivistic approaches do tend to have strong communities. Now, they don't reach out. They may not necessarily have everybody communities, so they may be small, but that same commitment that enforces the individual can also make for a very strong adhesion or cohesion in an individual group. Can anybody think of anything else that might be a positive here?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, a sense of belonging. Yeah.
As if you were in a good family.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Fits with that idea of community and psychological comfort. Yeah. Okay. Well, some positives. Exclusivism. Excuse one other. Throw one other out for you. There are not some texts within the Bible that seem to be exclusionary in nature. Yeah, you're right. I mean, in the Old Testament, clearly there's Israel and everybody else, right? And even passages in the gospel where Jesus says, "Who is not with me is against me," right? Now, there are texts in the Bible that are far more inclusive and opening and welcoming. But there certainly are some texts within the Bible that, if you were proof texting, could certainly be used to justify a kind of exclusionary mentality. Yeah, good. All right, we've done, I think, a few strengths for this model. Let's now talk about what might be some weaknesses or problems with adopting an exclusionary model. Okay, if you've got yeah, I mean, if you think you've got all the answers, you really don't need to ask any more questions, do you? Or if you think you've got everything you need, you know, Socrates long ago said the first step toward wisdom was being aware of what one does not know. So acknowledging one's ignorance is the first step to a lifelong quest toward this pursuit of truth or the pursuit of wisdom. So yes, this could be a very stultifying or a stagnant way of being good. This might be a weakness of
In
this.
the same vein, it creates a defense against intrusion of others. So you've got a strong enough group that attack from the outside. In England, you know,
Yeah, it could be a kind of defensiveness, a suspicion of outsiders or people that don't share your view. And I think one of the dangers there is if you are always suspicious of others or see them as the enemy, you miss out on any positives that the outsider may bring to how you know, bring, but you're not even open to that potential upside. Terry, you had your hand up.
You can disrespect other points of view and maybe even hate other people.
Okay, excellent. It can, you know, that us versus them mentality, while they might have some strengths, could very easily turn into being or as you said, if you think is that much different than the us. So certainly, of course, history is with lots of examples of how that us versus them mentality can be negative. I suppose, though, with a lot of these, they could be avoided For example, I suppose to use Kimberly's example, you could say, well, I don't need to grow from outside my tradition. There's plenty for me to grow within my tradition. Right. You could. I'm just, speaking from the exclusionist now for a little bit. Well, exclusionists necessarily would have to be hateful or express that kind of attitude toward other people. You could say, one thing I used to hear a lot growing up in Eastern Kentucky, well, I hate the sin, but I love the sinner. Right, I used to hear that a lot, or, well, I'm praying for you, this kind of stuff. Dismiss that. I had a neighbor in Michigan who thought I was going to split hell wide open. And so he used to always try to convert me, and finally, I just told him, I really wish you'd stop trying to convert me, but if you think I'm wrong, just pray for me, right? Because you're not going to annul the hell out of me, which is what you're doing. But if you pray for me, there might be a chance for me to do that. Psychological comfort can be a good thing, but sometimes it can be a bad thing long term, can't it? If what we're basing our emotional support on is delusionary or insufficient to handle more complicated things that may come our way. So though these things can be weaknesses, there might be ways to get around some of them. But
Lord help the accidental free thinker born into the community.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes. Yes, it's very good model, I suppose, as long as there's a lot of conformity, right? But it's not much fun growing up in that community if you can't share the views of that community. Yeah, very good, Harry.
One other thing you run into is when it's this is it, this is set in stone, it's very clear, no contrast. If you get to a stage where you no longer believe this part of it, then your culture and your tradition has said, all right, you're completely out of the fold. If you still agree and believe with 99% of whatever the group believes, but you just cannot, you no longer believe this one part is true, then again, as we're saying, nobody's open to that dialogue and open to looking at it differently. You may feel shunned, or you may feel that you need to leave that group instead of affecting it, hopefully in a positive way.
Yeah, very good, Carl, very good. And it is, and the list gets narrower and narrower, doesn't it? And a lot of conspiracy trials. Baptist, my mother and father still are, and they love it and it works. But it's been tried for heresy by the denomination. And one of the questions I got was, Brother Stratton, do you believe in a literal, eternal, fiery, burning hell? And I'm sitting there going, well, why don't I say literal, eternal? Sense where it's almost as if having faith is a checklist. And you just go down the list, and you got item A, you got item B, you got item C. Go item D, you're out of here, right? D for damned, right? So, yeah, that can be a real problem too. But there's one, and this is, I guess, as a philosopher, what interests me most. There's one, I would say, weakness that is against the intellectual or rational validity of this approach. And it's one issue that I think exclusivism simply does not know how to deal with very well. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying nobody should be an exclusionist. That's up to them, right? But I would say if you are going to be an exclusionist, this is the theological or intellectual problem you're going to have to try to resolve. Anybody want to take a stab at what I think that might be?
Doubt and the continual revelation of the Holy Spirit in our lives, that there's a developments.
The Holy Spirit, good. Anybody else want to try? You're right, it's not how it was expressed it to me, but that's a good point. Yes. Would you like to hand up to speak, sir?
Did you restate your question a minute ago?
Yeah. It seems to me that there is a fundamental intellectual or rational weakness in this position. And I'm trying to pinpoint what this, it seems to me, intellectual or rational difficulty would be for this position. That there's okay, I'll just come right out and tell you. Okay, good. It was getting close to it. I'll ask an informal question. My approach is that my religion is right and all other religions are wrong. All right? If I'm an exclusionist. Well, religions disagree about everything.
That was a thought I had because I know that there are several religions, and I'm not going to be able to name them, that have essentially a Father, a Son, and a Holy Ghost.
Okay.
It's fundamentally not different from Christianity except for the words.
Okay. We can take something that's a little less abstract than Trinity, right, or something like that. Let's take something we all know, the golden rule.
That was my first thought. It's just the characteristics that different religions, in addition to Christianity, want their people to have. So like the good qualities, being kind to people. And I mean, I know as a teacher, I have Hindu students and they have a lot of different celebrations. They have a day where they celebrate their siblings and, their ancestors and, but it's about being a good person and showing kindness, which is what we want to do as Christians. Just one example.
Yeah, and it's every religion that I know. I think I used to have a poster on the wall at my office in Alma that had practically every religion you can think of, and each of them had their own version of the golden rule. And one of the things I like to point out to students is that Plato actually has a version of the golden rule in his dialogues. And Plato is certainly not appealing to God to get that notion of a golden rule. The forms maybe, right, but not. So if you are an exclusionist, you have a real problem trying to explain the existence of overlapping truths. If your religion is all right and the other is wrong, one needs to pause and ask oneself the question, but we'll just use the golden rule, right, because that's our convenient example. Why do all these religions explain the fact the one that's got the truth, right? I'm the one that's got blind to God or whatever. How do I explain the fact that some of God's truth, at least, is found in these other traditions? It's a problem, isn't it? Because let's say I try to resolve it this way. Let's say, well, the reason we have the golden rule is because, God revealed it to Moses in the Old Testament, or God revealed it to Jesus in the New Testament. So you got that tricky thing there, right? The Old Testament, right? God revealed it to either Moses or Jesus. Well, then why do the Christians have a version of it? To confuse us. And God revealed it to right? Whoever we don't really know. Right? To confuse us, how can I say then that my religion is the only one that has the truth? So we've got another option, don't we? Say, We're not there yet. Since we're exclusionists, we don't want to say that we're going to these people because that undermines our exclusionism. Well, something like the golden rule. It's something human beings could have figured out on their own, like Plato, right? Common sense or philosophy or rational reflection on ethics.
If that was the case, they would reject it.
Okay. They might. Yeah, so say a little bit more, Harry, about that.
Well, if it's not from God, it's nothing.
Uh-huh. Okay,
That's all there is to it.
yeah, okay, good. Well, let's say we can take that track, right? Just for the sake of hypotheticals here. That maybe we can just figure out the golden rule on our own. And that's why they have it in addition to us. Same phrase. Well, if that can figure out its own apart from God, and Confucius could figure out its own apart from God, then maybe Jesus figured out his own apart from God.
And maybe there is no ultimate standard, and what we call ethics and morals is simply a human construction.
Yeah. Yeah. So now again, I'm not saying that nobody should be an exclusionist, right? But what I'm saying is if you are going to take that track, that is the fundamental issue you're going to have to try to resolve. You're going to have to come up with a way to intellectually responsibly deal with the fact. And as a philosopher, I'm reluctant to always use the word fact, right? But you have to deal with the fact overlapping truths.
If you're in the role of the exclusionist, you have to deal with it. If you are in the role of the exclusionist, from my lifelong experience, that would be the end of the conversation. But they don't have to deal with it.
In all practicality, I think you're probably right, Harry. But that's not how we want to be, is it? Well, I'm assuming, right, that we want to be thoughtful people. And we want to, now I'm saying in general, right? I know individuals, yes, but some people, as soon as you pointed this out to them, they'd be like, all right, they'd be going on their way and never think about it again, right? Because it's too uncomfortable. But I'm assuming now we're talking about people that actually want to have a thoughtful approach. If you're an exclusionist, it doesn't mean you won't necessarily want to have a thoughtful approach, right? I mean, there are theologians that work out of that perspective, right? I don't want to, well, I said I would, not only my cards on the table, obviously I'm not an exclusionist, right? So it's, I think that's fairly obvious. But people that are. In fact, one of the leading philosophers of religion in the world is an exclusionist. And that's Alvin Plantinga. He's one of the finest philosophers of religion of our generation. And he takes an exclusionist approach.
Can we not make the argument that most world religions have significant elements of exclusion and exclusivism just as a result of the fact that we have so many world religions, because everyone has segregated themselves into their own personal box.
Well, and the reason, I mean, of course, it's beyond the scope of what we're doing here to talk about why there may be so many differences. Certainly culture and other things goes into it. All world religions, since do have their exclusionary factions, but also what religions. So what times sometimes students will say to me, well, what do Hindus believe? Well, right? You know, it's like, if you say, what do Christians believe? many franchises of Christianity are there? Right? To talk about what Christians believe, it's something that every single one of them holds. Right? And same thing with the world religion. So all of them have inclusionary approaches, and they all have exclusionary approaches as well. So this is kind of, as I said, above. Obviously, the absolutists are probably not going to get along very long, are they? All right. There's going to be a lot of difference.
If I'm not being redundant with some comment that's already been made that hasn't quite come through remotely, I would think a corollary to what you're saying is the inconsistency. At least many exclusionary views, I think, include the notion that only God or only Jesus is perfect or without sin or without contradiction. And so for you to set yourself up or set up your Pope or whoever as being the one all-knowing human sort of flies in the face of that.
Yeah. That's a good point, Nelson. They try to get around that. For example, you could argue, and again, I don't agree with this necessarily, but you could argue, and this is often what they might do, is even though they are not perfect, they have a perfect book that tells them everything they need to know. And of course, they know how to read that perfect book the right way. And so therefore, they've got the truth, right? Again, that might be a case where, like Henry said, they ignore any difficulties that may be to that view, right? Now, certainly, if you read the Bible carefully, you're going to see that view doesn't hold up real strongly after a while, right? I mean, do you boil the Passover lamb or do you roast the Passover lamb? Well, one passage says roast it, and another passage says boil it. So, oh my goodness, now I'm really in a quandary, aren't I? Because even the Bible is giving me two different ways to prepare my lamb. Maybe we could compromise and do roasting or something. I'm not sure what that is, but I see that at gas stations all the time. They'll say roasted chicken, and I'm like, oh, it was roasted chicken. I don't know, dude. But after it's an R. We don't have an R. Well, that's how they fix it in gas stations, or a lot of them anyway. And I've never had the courage to actually try. Yes, the idea of a perfect book is going to run into problems too, right? And in terms of interreligious dialogue, we say the Bible is a perfect book. But a Hindu may say, well, the Bible is a perfect book. If you're a Muslim, it's a perfect, something we couldn't be it's a really going to get us very far in terms of getting along with one another. But then the overlapping truth problems are going to come here. Passages where the Bible say the same thing. And the Bible say the same thing. Or if you the ministers say the same thing. Or if you see not which is very, right? So at least God's not been stingy giving revelations to people, right? He's written a lot. Just imagine if God got royalties off all those. So anyway, if you decide you want to be an exclusionist, I really the problem we need to work on to be a thoughtful exclusionist, right? And it's up to you, to try to figure that out. Let's go to the other extreme and talk about my second model on the sheet. And we're not going to get through this whole thing, but that's okay. You folks know where I live, right? Let's talk about radical pluralism. Now, radical pluralism basically takes the approach that all religions are basically equal. You rightly pointed out that I would say religions have in common, right? You know, be kind, et cetera, et cetera. And so the radical pluralist would say, it really doesn't matter. You embrace, because it's all good, right? Now, in the Gita, for example, now I'll say a little bit more about what the Gita is actually saying maybe later if we have time. But that's a passage in the Gita when the young prince Arjuna is trying to decide whether to go to war or not. And he's visited by Krishna in disguise. And Krishna is an incarnation of the god Vishnu. And one of the things that the god Vishnu says to Arjuna, when he's asking about, well, this guru teaches this, or this person, you know, because he doesn't know, right? He's confused. And Vishnu says, whatever path men choose is mine. Very inclusive, right? Don't argue about all this stuff. They've all got their positive thing. So radical pluralism, you could say that you, which one you pick, right? Right? And so pick whichever one you want. So what might be some strengths of adopting a radical pluralist approach to other religions? Okay, inclusivity, good. We're not arguments and it's early. You believe what you want, I believe what I want. It's all good at the end of the day, right?
Open-minded to new ideas.
Okay, good. Open-minded, certainly willing to hear and learn from others. Good. What else?
More compassionate.
Can be more compassionate. Except an exclusionist, right? Which is one of the doctors when you get into the stuff. No one except the parties, right? Yeah, so yeah.
Is radical pluralism though not just an excuse for quote unquote spiritualism, spiritual but not religious? I don't identify, I take everything into account, anything goes. I feel a spiritual connection with the universe, and therefore there are no consequences. Whatever, you know, I can identify with. It's kind of like cafeteria Christianity. I'll pick and choose the items that make me feel good.
Well, the weaknesses. It's possible that adopting radical pluralism can be adopted for less than admirable motives, right? It could be adopted for laziness. Or it could be, you know, I don't want to say anything about these religions, so yeah, I'll just say what it all say, right? Or it could be adopted out of apathy, couldn't it?
Or political reasons to moderate the secular society.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So that, you know, apathy, I'll put that back, I'll come back to that. But no, actually, you know, what you say. So you could adopt this out of a kind of narcissistic tolerance similar to the exclusionist, right? Cafeteria, I believe you use the word. I think it could be. It's not really important enough to me. So I'll just say they're all the same. Right? Yeah. Anybody think of any more possible strengths? We've got tolerance of, and those things are, right? Any more strengths we can?
I was thinking of the model here at Duke that's interdenominational. What we say about that is we try to draw from the strengths of each tradition. So in a broader sense, even that would give us the opportunity to draw from the strengths of pluralistic religions in the world.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
World peace.
Peace. In fact, I was behind a car driving back from Pembroke the other day, and that was what their bumper sticker said. Visualize world peace. I thought, I wish you would visualize using a turn signal. But anyway. Yeah, quit worrying about solving the world's problems. Just come cut me off in the lane, right? Concentrate, people. Priorities. No. Weaknesses then. So I think we've got, open-minded tolerance where we go on strengths. You got one for us. It could be, it might actually be apathy or laziness or not wanting to take responsibility, for whatever. What might be some other?
Difficult to manage.
How so, Harry?
Everybody's got an opinion, everybody's opinion is equal, that's fine, I don't have any real problem with that. But somebody's got to be the boss normally of a community or of some. We elect ours and they go whichever way in the religious sphere, I guess, but it's fractious.
Yeah, I guess we could say something along the lines of, there's so much equality that it leads to inactivity, maybe. It's hard to get anything done because you got these different ideas and we've got right. Yeah. What else?
To pick up on Harry's word, a lack of community.
Uh-huh.
Complete lack of community because you don't identify with any specific.
And those spiritual, not religious people, that would fit them very well, wouldn't it? I don't need to go to church, or I don't need to go to synagogue, or I don't need to go to mosque, because it's me and whatever, right?
But what you just touched on in my mind is a lack of conviction. I feel like there would be a lack of growth because people don't see themselves as doing wrong to where they would need to improve since everything goes.
Good. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Yeah, piggybacking on the comment about cafeteria Christianity. If I don't like a certain point of view that other people think is important, I may be ignoring something that may be the most important thing for me to pay attention to. So there's an act of denial in there too, that for whatever reason.
Could cut us off from some place where we generally need to grow, right? So I guess you could say complacency, right? Might come out of this. Okay, hang on, 'cause these are good. Anything else before I talk about some of the intellectual or rational problems?
Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I see my picture up there. Okay. I'm sorry not to be there today, but I'm thinking my daughter, who will be here next week in at Adult Forum, she is a Christian. She practices Buddhism. And sees, and of course, the Christian Buddhist dialogue goes at least as far back as Thomas Merton, and she does not see any conflict between those two. But, and I think I'm speaking for me, not for her right now. Those two can mesh a bit, but other Hinduism and Christianity seem much farther, much more difficult to put together in without contradiction. So I mean, in the inclusion model, you've got a lot of, it's not, there are other positions than the everybody is equal, everybody is right. there is, and I don't want to say it's a pick and choose, it is more of a real working to try to frame something that can be Christian with elements of something else. And you can talk about that, say, with missionaries encountering African religions that could bring parts of their religion into Christianity. And maybe that's okay. Well, that's enough.
Well, I've got 5 models, Christian. I only so we're going to get through the kind of thing you're talking about a little bit later. So, but yes, you're making a great point. But it's a weakness about equality. It ignores the real and genuine differences that religions have. They are not all simply about the same thing, right? Superficially, you can see them that way. And some ones they really are, right? That kind of thing. But there are some genuine differences. For example, one here that I really love is Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Buddhist monk, and I have learned much from Thich Nhat Hanh. But if you read his book on Jesus, you're going to see right away where he defines Jesus in certain ways. There is going to be a fundamental and crucial difference between how Christians see Jesus and how Buddhists see Jesus. Just let me give you what I'm saying. Almost all, but again, Buddhism, like Christianity, a lot of franchises, right? Right. Almost all of Buddhism is non-theistic. There is no God who can save you or deliver you from your sins or who created the world. Some versions of Buddhism that acknowledge that are gods, those gods are just as much in need of salvation as human beings. So that they are also part of the cycle of kindness and sorrow and need to be delivered. Right? So even if you can say that Jesus was a figure like the Buddha, he's still not the Son of God. Right? That's a real difference. Now, that's one thing I would say. Also, if you look at religions and you study them in detail, what they have a common morality, I would say, which is good. What they think is wrong with the human condition and how to fix it can differ radically in these traditions. For example, I'll just use Buddhism because we're talking about that. Then are we have the sin, right? And so we need to solve the problem of sin. In Buddhism, our big problem is that we suffer. So how do we solve the problem of suffering? Exactly the same, is it? So the danger of radical pluralism, and I would say, and I really look at what you said, because we got to see with this accuracy thing, I think it fails to appreciate the genuinely different perspectives that can be found in the world religious traditions. Okay, so yeah, there are. I'll mention another time. Oh, we're almost out of time, Mark Carl.
Let's go. 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Oh, goodness, I can do a lot in 15 minutes. Second, I would say another big problem for radical pluralism, and this may be more of an empirical or sociological difficulty, but there is no religion that understands itself this way. that religions are equally valid. So, if you do this, you're going to have to say, either none of the religions, because they don't understand themselves this way, right? Or this way of thinking that they're all equal breaks down. You know, what is that message from the Gita? Says to Krishna, says to Arjuna, rather, that whatever man chooses mind, now he's tolerant, right? And he's saying that he's going to accept all these payments. But the reason it's tolerant is because he implements his interests. So that's why we know it. Not because, right? It's just everybody's got the equal amount of truth, or the same truth. But how we live understands how we can relate to one another. Some religions do. Right? So it sees itself as just and sense of fundamentally the ones that are right.
So does that apply that any pluralism is radical?
No, it's okay. In fact, I'm talking about the three most extreme cases right now. Exclusionism and radical pluralism to extreme views, right? Yeah. No, I'm going to get into a more defensible pluralism and a more defensible exclusionism whenever we have time, which is probably not going to be today, I don't think. That understands itself that way, so we have to explain no religion really understands itself properly, right? And this is what I think is probably more insidious as a problem. We can truly embrace radical pluralism. You really lose defensively the ability to make judgments about right and wrong. Because if everything is right, then that means nothing. Very much differences between how religions view right and wrong. Now, there's overlap too, but there are also some serious differences. And if you're going to embrace radical pluralism, you can't really criticize the moral codes of other people. And here's where that paradox comes back. If I'm going to say everything is good, then that means even the exclusionist is good. And his or her position fundamentally contradicts the rest of the person. Right? It's hard to see how you can reconcile those two views. But it's a radical pluralist. It's not the fact that that's the radical pluralist is completely wrong. We're not about it, right?
But they say that frequently.
And they do. But the radical pluralist is in a tougher bind there on how to deal with people that may be fundamentally opposed to what they think. You know, I hear this from students all the time. You folks probably hear it too in different contexts. But when it comes to things like morality, every semester I hear this when we start talking about ethics. Well, Dr. Stratton, who's to say what's right and wrong? And that's always way to it. Who's to say? And normally I say, well, I don't know. Can you come on saying that? Might let me do it. No. It's about, it's like, I'm on this file, students say, Lots of ethics. I usually say, well, Plato. He died in Aristotle. No, but you see my point though is, right, this whole notion, if you really adopt this kind of radical pluralism, you forfeit the right to make judgments of right and wrong. And I don't think any of us want to pay that price, really. And again, with our radical pluralists, I think a lot of times people that embrace radical pluralism are well-intentioned, that what they're wanting to be is tolerant and inclusive and appreciative of other traditions and this kind of thing. My problem with it really is that it's fairly lazy intellectually. That it's not a pluralism based on genuine appreciation for the differences, right, that actually exist among people, but it's just kind of accepting of whatever without really putting any thought into it. Because to really get along, to really be in community, to really dialogue, right, it's hard work, is it not? Get to know a person and communicate with a person and appreciate that person, then we really have to know both the ways that we're similar and what we like about each other, but we also have to appreciate those differences, don't we? You recognize the differences. You have to realize there's something to tolerate. Yeah, everybody agree with me 100%. I don't need to tolerate those people. They're geniuses. No, I'm just kidding when I say that.
It's hard to keep the conversation going though.
How so, Harry?
If everything's all the same all the time, what do you talk about?
Yeah.
I mean,
The Bulls. The weather. But even there, runs quick, doesn't it?
yeah.
Nice weather we're having, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll rain tomorrow. Yes.
Is radical pluralism not something that is really taking hold in society as we see so many people making an exodus away from the church? So many people identify with the idea of spiritualism without boundaries. So I like all the benefits without any of the framework, any of the structure, any of the rules, any of the consequences. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and make up the rules as I go.
I do think that is happening to a great extent. Because let's face it, and this is where we Christians have to take some blame, or the church has to take some blame. The Christian church at times, I'm sorry, I hope this doesn't offend anybody, has been judgmental. And the different franchises of Christianity run too much among themselves about issues that, while I guess they're important, really, if you're a theologian, which I'm not, right? But if you're a theologian, I guess they're really important, but most people really don't care. I mean, the church, Protestant church split over the issue of infralapsarianism versus supralapsarianism. I hope you folks don't lose any sleep over that, worrying about which way we should be here at New Chapel. But, you know, they all true, right? And so when people are exposed to this kind of harsh or judgmental, nitpicky kind of religion, then they would fit it all. And pluralism, this radical pluralism, is an easy way, or it's an easy first step toward getting away from that, you know. And it's not a very thoughtful way. And, you know, if they think it through, you know, again, I'm going off my experience with college students. A lot of them have been very strict religious families, and they get to college and you know, anymore, right? To a certain extent, Because some of the religious stories I hear of their childhood, it's all abusive. No, it's abusive in some cases, right? So in college, they got this freedom and, you know, goals and all this. But eventually, I guess that people embrace radical progress that's necessary to stand away from this other thing, that they'll come to see that radical pluralism won't ultimately be satisfactory either. Right. And so I think that these other models that I'm going to talk about someday will give us a better way forward. Right. But yes, I do see a lot of that, especially in young people, I think, because they're reacting against that incredibly rigid thing. And, you know, look, you've been grown up in a fundamentalist kind of Christian home, and then all of a sudden you meet a Hindu, for example, and they're really nice people. You know. She's my best friend, but she's not the same religion as me. She's really nice. How can she be awful, right? Eventually they'll get start to fight or something, you know, if they're around long enough. I'm kidding a little bit about that, but right? And the old model starts to fade. If you don't have a thoughtful thing to put in its place, right, then probably an easy kind of radical pluralism is where you're going to go. Because the way you know that all Hindus ain't so nice, right? I mean, you know, the Hindus killing Muslims right now, and vice versa, right? So, anyway, sorry, Carl, I probably went too long.
No, we're fine.
How much you got?
We got 3 minutes. Or more if you want.
No. I make you folks late for church. May not be able to go home, and they have to make you folks late for church. That's not going to work. Go ahead, Harry. You're going to say that.
So we should put a radical in front of exclusionism too at this point, until we hear what you have to say about the moderate exclusion.
Yeah, I probably should have put radical in front of exclusionism. I just assumed that you would know what exclusionism is.
Brian, I'm
That's exactly what
I've been
checking out radiation. Other examples.
Brian, I'm seeing the room with myself on the screen. I've tried to get it off, but I'm feeling like I'm your guardian angel looking over you right now. And you've done a really good job with this class. So I think I've been a pretty good guardian angel.
I appreciate you ever so much. Let's call it. Assuming you want me back. How many more? Well, there's approximations of an ideal, is that right? And so if you folks decide to have me back, we'll do the other two, okay? I didn't time this out very well, but you know, anyway.
We expect you back.
Okay.
I'll way overstep my authority and invite you back already. I've never been in a discussion with Brian that wasn't wonderfully interesting. And I've never been in a discussion with him where he covered all of his topics. I hear about that train that got stuck for 20 hours in South Carolina. There are very few people I would want to be on that train with, stuck for 20 hours at a standstill. Brian is one of them. Thank you very much, Brian. Next week, the Reverend Catherine Lester Bacon, Director of Religious Life at Duke University Chapel, will present her current work around the maintenance and care of religious spaces on a college campus. That's interesting. Thanks for being here. Have a wonderful week and we'll see you next Sunday.
Thank you.